Howdy, this is Lemmy with RevZilla, here to talk to you today about Fox Shox suspension for Harley. You should be looking into some Fox Shox suspension pieces for your motorcycle if you're looking for a better ride, if you want to ride faster and more comfortably on your Harley-Davidson. Now, Fox is making these things really for a wide variety of motorcycles in terms of Harley. Now, there's lots and lots of late model stuff. You're going to see different availability depending on the layout of the motorcycle, but they actually kind of carry pretty far back, too. I mean, we're seeing some decades-old applications there as well. So make sure you use our bike finder. We're going to show you the stuff that fits your bike precisely. Installation on this stuff is going to vary depending on the product, depending on your bike, depending on your skill level to some degree or another. I'm going to say most of this stuff's going to average in around 2 beards on our beard scale of difficulty. You will need some specialty tools, maybe a couple of shop items. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But if you're halfway experienced with turn wrenches, you should be able to get this stuff onto your bike in your own garage in just a couple of hours. Let's kick things off before we break down Fox's product line and who Fox is as a company, why you might want to consider them, and then we'll talk about some of the finer points, the differences between a few of the products they have for your motorcycle. So you should know that Fox Shox is the brand with the tail. That is different, of course, than the Fox company with the head. That's a totally different company. Those are the gloves and helmet people. They do something different than suspension. And of course, if you happen to see something with a Fox body that is a Ford car, completely ignore that. It has nothing to do with motorcycles. Fox Shox, however, started back in 1974. Bob Fox built some prototype Shox, fit them to his Mako dirt bike. By 1982, Eddie Lawson was winning AMA Superbike on them. So these guys figured out what they were doing very, very quickly. They have a performance background. You'll see them today on all sorts of ATV, UTV stuff. You'll see them on OEM vehicles. You'll see them on deserts, like sort of desert runners, pre-runner stuff, huge long travel suspension trucks. They're really into a lot of different things. Suspension is not new to them, and they've finally entered the Harley game. They've got some really neat products. Now, the product lines are actually really easy to understand. I think it's sort of helpful. I'm going to walk you through a couple of the pieces here, and you should be able to kind of home in on one or two things I think that are going to work well for your bike. So let's start up at the front end of your Harley-Davidson. You've really got two choices when it comes to Fox. Now, Fox starts with a spring kit for your front end. Now, their springs differ from your factory springs. If you look at these things, you'll notice these are linear springs. This is the same spring rate all the way through the spring. This is in contrast to your factory springs, which may be progressive. Some folks prefer linear springs, some folks prefer a progressive. I personally come down on the side of linear springs. If you're a linear spring tuner, you may want to consider these things. Now, they're going to come in 3 different flavors. You can get these in standard duty. You can get them in heavy duty, good for folks who are packing 240 pounds or better on the bike frequently. You can also get them in a lowered version. So depending on what it is you're trying to do with your motorcycle, you may have a couple of different options there. Now, the step up, of course, if you're looking to really overhaul that front end, would be a cartridge kit. So a cartridge kit is not just the spring, but we're also including the valving, the damping. We're getting all the hydraulic pieces that come along. These will drop right into your factory fork. You don't have to do any modifying or machining, nothing crazy, but these are going to get you all of the stuff you need. These are valved specifically for your motorcycle. Again, you're going to have those spring choices. These are valved for your particular bike. You're not going to have to go crazy figuring out exactly how to tune these things too. Drop them in and go. Now let's swing back to the rear end of the motorcycle. We'll talk about a couple of the options that you can get. So we're going to start with the most basic stuff here, the IFP shock. IFP is internal floating piston. So a little bit of suspension theory here. Generally speaking, we're talking about hydraulically damping a shock. We want to keep the gas charge and the oil separate. When those things mix, they heat up, and the shock working, the oil cavitates. Cavitate's a fancy word for foams. It turns into foam. Now, if you think about how hydraulic damping actually works, we're taking an oil and we are shoving it through a very specifically sized orifice. Now, that size of the orifice plus the weight of the oil are very carefully considered. However, when you mix up a bunch of air into that oil, it doesn't work as designed. We're now shoving sort of a different mixture through that hole, and then all the damping goes to hell. That internal floating piston helps keep that charging gas and the oil separate. So when you see IFP, internal floating piston, that's good stuff. These are monotube shocks. Most of the cheaper shocks in the market are going to be twin tube. Again, sort of like the springs we talked about earlier, most people prefer either monotube or twin tube. I'm personally a monotube fan. It's nice to see Fox using them. Now the step up from here is the IFP-R shock. The IFP-R, of course, indicating that rebound is adjustable. So in addition to the preload adjustment that you have in the IFP, you also get rebound adjustment on the IFP-R. And then if you want to take that one step further, we move into their piggyback shock. So the piggyback shock, or remote reservoir shock, actually has this separate unit on the side. And what this does is gives a larger volume of gas, and it also, again, helps keep that stuff cool. It's out in the breeze, and it's keeping the oil and gas charge cooler simply because there's a bigger volume of it, and these two things are separate and distinct from one another. It's important. If you see piggybacks on a bike, odds are good that is a performance-minded rider. So the QS3R is probably the piggyback shock that you're going to see most often from Fox. This is a particularly cool shock. I like this. In addition to that preload adjustment, that rebound adjustment we talked about earlier, you've also got compression adjustment, but they make this pretty simple. Rather than having 6,000 clicks worth of adjustment, they have 3 positions, and really you're going to be selecting whether you are solo with gear, or whether you are 2-up with or without gear. Makes it very simple to break things down. You simply snap your shocks into the correct position after you get your sag adjustment, and you're pretty much ready to rock. It simplifies all sorts of things, makes figuring out what you're doing with your suspension very, very easy, turns almost anybody into a pretty accurate tuner most of the time. Now, when we're looking at all this stuff too, you should know this stuff is really nicely machined. You'll notice that there's just beautiful machine work all over the aluminum bodies here. One of the things I think is really cool is on the preload adjuster rings. These things are not only beautiful, but Fox does something I don't think I've seen from any other suspension company. They include a tool. Now, obviously everybody includes a tool. However, this particular tool is made of plastic. It is non-marring. These pieces are machined so finely. If you have these off the bike and you want to adjust your preload adjusters, you can absolutely do so. Once they're on the bike and the bike's under a load, though, you do need a tool in order to twist them. That's true of just about any suspension. Fox thoughtfully includes a plastic tool to do that. So your nice, your nice finish on your shock doesn't get marred, especially if you're using them. If you're the type of person who's buying an adjustable shock, odds are good you're actually going to adjust it. You don't want the thing to look beat up simply because you're using the product the way it was designed. Very nice detail part on Fox's part as far as I am concerned. Let's get into installation just a little bit. Now we got a couple of different products here, kind of all over the map. I'll try and hit everything very quickly. As far as fork work is concerned, if you've done fork work before, everything here should be pretty straightforward. Swapping springs, obviously not crazy difficult. A cartridge kit, one step of difficulty beyond that, but nothing crazy. Again, these are made specifically for bike models. You're not going to have to be re-engineering the wheel here. These are bolt-in components. If you've never done any type of front-end work, you should realize you're going to need obviously your standard set of hand tools. However, you are going to need a way to get your bike into the air. For most of you, that's probably going to be a bike jack. You can, of course, suspend from overhead. There's a couple different ways to do that, but make sure if you're buying something like this, you're going to need to get your bike in the air. You're going to either want to have help from a friend, you're going to want to purchase your own jack or other method of getting your bike up in the air, or again, you may want to talk to your local shop and see if they'd be interested in installing your parts for you. Moving on to the rear end of things. Installing shocks is usually a pretty straightforward sort of affair. It's generally a bolt-in sort of a thing. No exception with the Fox pieces here. These will bolt right up. They do include spacers to make fitment easy, or if you happen to have something that's slightly modified, usually those spacers will get you out of a fairly tight jam. If you want a little bit more information on how that process works, we actually have a shock installation video you can check out. Pretty simple. Most of you should feel pretty good about changing out a set of shocks. Really great. I'm thinking especially for those of you who are on Sportsters. Really phenomenal to be able to kind of pick the back end of your bike up to where the Sportster used to be. Really makes those bikes lots more rideable in my estimation. So in general, I'm pretty excited about Fox suspension if you haven't figured that out already. It's really great stuff. I think there's enough adjustability here to keep most people happy without getting sort of mired down in the weeds of suspension tuning. Don't take my word for it though. Click down below, read what some riders who are rocking Fox suspension on their bikes have to say about it. If you need any help, whether it's going to be product choice, whether it's fitment, installation, give us a holler. We'll be more than happy to help you. Talk to one of our very friendly gear geeks. See us at RevZilla.com, or of course you can always pick up the phone, 877-792-9455. I'm Lem. I'm out of here.